Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
Welcome to Becoming Bridge Builders, the podcast where we explore how to connect people, ideas, and opportunities to create lasting impact. I am your host, Keith Haney. Today, we're talking about something that affects every leader, entrepreneur, and influencer, the power of your story. Today, our guest, Bill Blankschaen, founder and chief story architect for Story Builders. Bill and his team have worked with some of the most influential voices in leadership, business, and culture. Names like John C. Maxwell, Michael Hyatt, Zig Ziglar's family, and even Shark Tank's Kevin Harrington. Bill is also New York Times best-selling writer and author of Your Story Advantage, a proven pathway to maximize your impact, influence, and income. We welcome Bill to the podcast. How you doing today, Bill?
Oh, Keith, thank you for that kind intro. Such a pleasure to be here with you. Always love talking story and looking forward to diving in. Yeah.
I love talking stories too. Looking forward to it. It should be fun. But I'm going to ask you my favorite question as we jump in here. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Boy, that's a tough one, Keith, because I feel like I've been the beneficiary of so much good advice over the years from so many people who know more than me. I think some of the best advice I ever heard was, it actually didn't come from a person in person. And I think that this is important. I got it through a book. And so I got it from somebody capturing their story and sharing it. But it's, I think it was Davy Crockett, actually, or one of those, or Daniel Boone, somebody like it, Davy Crockett. But he said this, I don't know about other people, but sometimes I find myself, facing indecision when I need to make a decision. I could do this, I could do that. I see the value of this, value of that. And his advice was really simple. It was, be sure you're right, then go ahead. And I just found that to be clarifying for me. Hey, if I'm right about this, then just go. And what I learned through that process was that as you move forward, even if that decision wasn't maybe completely 100% the best decision, as you move forward with that mindset, things become clearer. You can alter, you can pivot, you can adjust, and you see things you didn't see before because you had the courage to step out and take that action. I've done that just many times in life, and always look back and appreciated the fact that I was, all right, I'm pretty sure I'm right, so I'm going in.
I like that. It's good. So let's talk about the title of your book, Your Story Advantage. What does that phrase mean to you, and why is that so important for leaders today?
Well, that phrase is so important to me because story is important to me. And I think, here's what I believe, Keith. I believe everybody has a story worth telling. And I think that story gives them a unique advantage. And I don't just mean story like what has happened to you in your life, the events of your life, but what did you learn from it? What are the lessons you've accumulated over the years, the expertise you've acquired, that body of wisdom, if you will, that you've grown along the way? And I think so many people undervalue that because it feels normal to them. They don't feel like it's something special. And I'm really on a mission to help people understand every story matters and that they have this distinct advantage to grow their business, to grow their influence, their impact in powerful ways if they're willing to lean into it and do that. Because that's where breakthrough happens. Breakthrough begins when you start with your story. And I could go into my own story of how that was true for me.
I love that.
If you don't mind. Let me just dive into it as I'm thinking about it. Because I used to not do what I do now. I used to be help start a private school, was leading that for almost a dozen years, and we grew it from the ground up at K4 through 12. It was a really great college prep school. got awesome hugs from kindergartners every morning, helped teenagers navigate life, work with families in the trenches of tough stuff. And I was doing good things. But at the same time, I felt within me, there was this sense of almost a calling to be a writer, to be a storyteller. And I always thought of myself as that, but I realized I'm not actually writing. I'm not actually storytelling. I'm not doing the things that I think I'm put here to do, even though I'm doing something good. And so eventually I had to reach the place of I didn't want to look back on my life and regret not having leaned into my story, leaned into who I was meant to be. So I stepped away from that school, stepped out into the unknown. And just like you, we had 6 kids and going through that process and I never worked harder in my life through that entire year. You know, learning publishing, the whole industry, the ins and outs, interviewing publishers, meeting with publishers, developing book proposals, writers, everything in the space, like understanding all of it, really becoming a student of kind of the science and the art of storytelling. But it wasn't easy, as you can imagine. You know, stepping out from that into the unknown. I remember one time I was sitting in the backyard, and this was in Northeast Ohio. I was sitting in the backyard, beautiful spring day, and I had my pen and paper out, and I was kind of writing ideas for this book that I wanted to write. And on the outside, it was a beautiful day. The winds, you know, wafting through the trees, the sun's shining, the birds are chirping. But on the inside, I felt that fear of, man, what if this doesn't work? 6 kids, no income. How is this going to turn out? Are we all going to be living in a cardboard box under a freeway somewhere? How is this going to happen? But I just kept moving forward and I kept doing it. And curiously enough, as it turned out, that very book that I was working on that day ended up getting picked up by a publisher, ended up publishing that book, writing that, and realizing I was actually really good at this and really good at the storytelling and the writing. And other people began to ask me, hey, can you help me with my book? Can we help do something? And out of that came Story Builders. Right. So since then, you know, like we've been working with people like John Maxwell, Dean Graziosi, and all sorts of people like that. But to me, it one of the things that I'm really empowered by is the people who are building something. Maybe you haven't heard of them yet, but they have a valuable message that they want to share with the world, and helping them create that and build that and multiply that message really is about making the world a better place. How can we help amplify those voices by seeing the value of their story, their ideas, their message, and then actually helping them create things, whether their brand story, their book, or a lot of other ways to monetize a message as well. But all of it comes back to that core idea of your breakthrough begins when you have that courage to really start with your story, embrace it, and live it out.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I did my doctoral dissertation, and I wanted to turn that dissertation, all those numbers and research, into something that was digestible by normal folks who weren't into the numbers. So I wrote my last book was about telling a story of organizational change by telling a story. Having a young pastor go to a congregation and learn to the pains of trying to navigate change and the lessons he learned.
Sure,
And you're right, telling a story is so powerful. And I
sure.
think most people feel like you just said that we don't have anything worth telling. So how do you get people to overcome the sense that my story isn't all that special?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two traps that are related here. One is the normalcy trap, which I just mentioned that your story feels normal to you, and so you don't value it. And it's only when we actually have the courage to share what we've learned that other people, you see it, a light bulb come on in somebody else's eyes, right? They're like, oh, that's actually really helpful. Thank you. And we walk away thinking that was helpful. I didn't think that was that big a deal. It feels normal to me. But the normalcy trap is also related to what I call the confidence trap. The confidence trap says that we tend to deify others and diminish ourselves. Right? We tend to put other people on a pedestal, their story, their message, they're amazing, but I'm not really that special. I don't really have that much to contribute. And it's almost like this false sense of pride, really, that gets in our own way, and we stumble over it. I remember some years ago, I had lunch in New York City with someone who, if I shared their last name, everybody would know the last name, guaranteed. And I had lunch with this person. We were talking about helping them create a digital course and monetize their message in some ways. And this person just confided in me and said, I get invited to some pretty powerful rooms, and they pay me a lot of money to come in and share my opinion. She said, but I got to tell you, a lot of times I'm not confident they actually care about my opinion. I just think they want my last name in the room. And I thought, well, here's this person who most people would say has made it, and everybody cares what they think, and they've arrived. They're the ones on the most people's pedestal, and here they're diminishing themselves still, right? Like, well, if they're doing it, and I've seen the same thing from New York to LA, everywhere in between, it's just human tendency. And so recognizing that everybody has the same problem, I think gives us the courage to say, all right, then I just need to get clear on my message, my what I call our meaningful message, and then follow a proven process to bring that to life and share it.
So let's talk about that proven process, because I know people are dying to know, okay, tell me what are the secret. In my work, I always get heard to say, tell me the secret sauce to reach lost people. Give me the magic
Sure,
bullet.
sure.
But tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about what your strategy is to maximize impact, influence, and income.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I put it all in the book, right? Your story advantage. That's the whole purpose of the book is let's pull the curtain back and share it with everybody. Like I want to dump a dozen years of learning on people in simplified, actionable ways. And I think it begins with the getting clear on that meaningful message, really giving some thought to what is it that you are passionate about and that is meaningful and that has an impact. And I give a process for how to do that in the book. But that leads to what I call the storytelling structure, which is it's a 5-part process that people can use to tell anything, any message. You want to make any message matter. It's like taking the magic of storytelling and laying it over the message that you want to tell. But I think one of the biggest ahas about using that storytelling structure, and I'm happy to walk through each step if that works for you. But one of the biggest ahas is the realization that your story is about you, but your story is not for you. And I think a lot of people, a lot of pastors make that mistake, right? They're like, hey, I get up in the pulpit and I've got this great message to share, and everybody's going to love it because I think it's awesome. And I'm going to put it, and then they haven't given thought to who is this actually for? I mean, ultimately, of course, for the pastor, there's I'm doing this for God, but I'm serving the people by doing this. And so that's one of the biggest flips, and if we can make that flip, then we understand that my story that I'm sharing, the wisdom that I'm sharing, the message I'm sharing is in service for others. I'm doing this to make the world a better place, not for me. And so that with that in mind, then you can approach that 5-part storytelling structure and work through that to really create any message, frankly. It could be a blog post, it could be a sermon, it could be an example, it could be a book, it could be your brand story. Whatever you're doing, you can use this as your guideline, your template to create something really powerful.
I want to dig into that a little bit more, because when I do a sermon, when
Yeah,
I got better at this than when I first started out, my wife gave
sure.
me a piece of advice that always stuck with me as I prepare a sermon or a message. And that is, what does the hearer need to understand that they don't now?
Mm,
And so instead of, like you said, instead of me preaching a message that I think is really cool, my focus is always on
yeah,
what about what I'm about to say may confuse someone or they may not understand. And so I'm answering the questions that I think people out in the audience are asking in my message more than just preaching to myself.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, you're doing what I just said. You're putting yourself in the place of the audience, right? Of what are they thinking and feeling, and this is where the storytelling structure starts. It starts with the first step in the storytelling structure is attention. You have to get people's attention. We often assume that because I care about what I'm saying, everybody else must care about what I'm saying, right? And you know better than that as you watch people fall asleep in the congregation,
Right.
right? Not everybody's there fully present. And so you have to get their attention. To do that, you have to ask, what is it that they want? What is it that they really want? And then the second part of that, once you get clarity on that, and that takes a little digging, not just on the surface, but really deep down, what do they want beneath the surface? But then the second part is closely connected, which I call tension. So attention, getting their attention, and then tension, which is what you were just saying. What are the problems that they have? What are the what's keeping them from getting what they want? What's holding them back in this space? What are the barriers that exist? And in there, you can really drill down into thinking about tangible barriers and intangible barriers. Tangible barriers, stuff they can touch, taste, feel. That could be, I don't have money, I don't have time, I don't have these resources, I don't have the connect, whatever that might be. But the intangible ones, that goes to what we talked about a minute ago with my friend in New York of, I have fears that I'm wrestling with, or I don't think I'm good enough, or I don't think I'm capable of that, or what if I fail? And what if people laugh when I fail? That's the stuff that's really behind a lot of that. And then once you give thought to that, then you can, then and only then do you make what I call the connection, point three, the connection, connecting your story with their need and what they need. So if you're talking about your brand, that's when you can talk about you, but only in the context of what do they want, what do they need, because that's where their zone of concern is. That's where their focus is. That's what matters to them. On the other hand, if this is about messaging something, let's say a leader to an organization or a team, then it's about, all right, what story can I pull in from my experience or the organization's experience? Again, thinking about what do they want? What are the problems they have? How can I bring that story together to set up the fourth step, which is the solution? So attention, tension, connection, solution. And the solution is where most pastors, most leaders, most people with a message, that's usually where they start at step 4. They skip the first 3, jump right to step 4 and say, this is what I have to say, and assume everyone's going to listen. And it is an important piece. The solution is a very important piece because that's where you create your intellectual property. That's where you create your core message. That's where you really refine that. It's the key to monetizing a message in a lot of different ways and multiplying that impact. But we can't start there, right? And so when you get to that, then you can really, here's the solution to your problem. Here's what I have brought to the table. And this is where, we do such, I think, phenomenal work at Story Builders, helping people to build that out and develop it to create that intellectual property, which people can then figure out how do I monetize that into different ways, depending on the situation. We can talk through scenarios, but all that leads to the 5th step, which is action. Action. What do you want people to do? Based on the solution you're presenting, what do you want them to do? Keeping in mind your expertise, you know what they should do. And as a pastor, this is always part of that, right? You're thinking, how can I call them to live differently, do something differently, act differently? What does that look like? But in business or leadership of any kind, we can't just assume people know what the next logical step is, that they can put all the pieces together. And so providing that path of the next logical step is to do this, or here's how to do it. And I give a whole, action matrix building. And in the book, I have a couple chapters devoted to how do you do this in a book, and what does it mean in a book, and all the questions to ask. And so there's a lot more depth to all of this, but I just that storytelling structure can be so helpful to create just a sticky, whatever message you're trying to share, lay this on top of it, and it could really help bring it to life.
As I look at how your book is laid out, I look at it and I notice chapter 5 is how to structure your book. Um, and I'm curious, what you just said is because as most people want to start right there. Okay, let me just tell me how to lay out the book first. What do you say is probably the most important thing to figure out before you get to how do I lay out this book? Is it developing and honing the story that you're trying to tell before you try and lay out how you're going to tell the story?
Yeah, well, we have 6 book starter questions, and I lay all these out in the book, so they're certainly there for everybody to see. The very first one, is what we call the story focus question, and that gets to what you're talking about here. And the question is this: if someone were to read your book, let's imagine the book is done, it's in their hands, they read it, they close it, they set it on the bedside table, and they walk away and they forget 99% of what they just read. It's wiped clean. They only remember one thing. What do you want that one thing to be? What's that one thing that you want? Man, if they forget everything else, don't forget this. And I have found that question to be just a very powerful question for people to help clarify for themselves. Yeah, what is that one thing that I want to stick with? And what's the one thing that really matters? If you forget everything else, there's a lot of good stuff I can say, a lot of great wisdom I can say, but what's the one thing? And if you get clear on that, that becomes kind of the tip of the arrow for the whole book project of the book then gets built around communicating that one thing. And that becomes so powerful because if you've written books or you know people who've worked on books, a book is not a short thing. I mean, a book can be 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90,000 words. It's a lot of words, a lot of ideas. And there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of book drafts that should get cut because it doesn't support the main idea. Maybe it's great for another book or another message or so forth. But so many people just have the idea that I just got to dump everything I know into a book and call it a book and people will think it's great. But again, it's not about you. It's for them, right? It is about you, but it's for them. So that first question is critical. That story focused question. It begins with getting clear on what is that one thing to ask, because that is going to be so critical to lay the foundation for truly a book that really resonates with people.
So you've spent your whole career helping people develop and tell their stories. What was the defining moment for you to say, this is what I want to invest my life in?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's hard to find a defining moment because even as a young boy, I loved stories. I mean, I sucked up books. I didn't read them. I just absorbed them. Right? I mean, I was a kid who sat at the breakfast table and kept spinning the cereal box, reading it endlessly as I ate. Right? I just always had that, and always thought of myself as a student of story. Even in my college work, I majored in English and history. Right? What are the stories that took place, and how do I communicate them in a powerful way? So I think that's always been part of it. I've always loved it. But I think the pivotal thing came when I helped, or when I wrote that first book and realized, this is actually really good. And as I began to help other people and having them show, oh, so appreciate that. Or people would tell me, I never could have done this without you. Those kind of things. And I felt like I had actually contributed something, not just helpful, but transformative. Right. Because that's really what I love to do is we take ideas that are really good ideas and make them exceptionally great ideas. Right. So we take what's good and turn it into great, or what's okay and turn it into something great in that process. It's a collaborative process. And that's why one of the things I say is if you want to elevate, you have to collaborate. You've got to be willing to work with other people. If you try to do it all on your own, you can only get so high. John Maxwell talks about the law of the lid. You run into that lid, and you can't lift that lid without help from others to help you do that lifting and leverage their expertise. So, from my experience, I think it's always been there, but I think the light bulb really came on when I began to actually do it and see how powerful it was.
So tell us the vision behind Story Builders.
Yeah, well, I mean, the vision is every story matters. We believe that at a very deep level, and we're a Christian company, by the way. I mean, that's what's undergirds our values, right? So that's where we're coming from, and why we believe every story matters. And so as we're working with people, we often tell people you don't have to share the details of our faith to enjoy the benefits of our beliefs, because we're very values driven in how we do things. So that's all part of our vision. Our vision is not just to make more money. That isn't our vision. Our vision is to help people tell their stories well, to make the world a better place. And that's what drives us, what fuels us. So, that's the vision, is to help people who have valuable messages, but don't know how to multiply them, don't know how to share them well, don't know how to package them and make them into something that will truly resonate and get out there. And because of that, I don't want them to be like where I thought I might be at the end of my life, looking back and regretting, if only I had done a better job of communicating this, if only I had done something. I don't want those regrets to be there. I want people to be able to tell their story in a way that resonates. So at the end of this journey, they look back and say, I contributed a verse to humanity's song. And it was a meaningful verse, and I made a difference, and I made an impact.
So if I walked into Story Builders, how would you help me to figure out my brand, develop my story, well, how would you work with me?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, you wouldn't be able to walk in because we have a virtual team. So you could virtually walk into the
Virtually
room.
walk in.
If you were in Orlando, I'd be happy to sit down with you. We grab coffee or something. Absolutely. But yeah, so it depends on what you need. I mean, that's really what we do is we don't come in with an agenda. We come in, let's get to know you. Let's figure out what your story is. And sometimes, candidly, Keith, sometimes we're not the right fit to help people with whenever they are, where they're at, or with what the project is. Sometimes we can send them to other people that we know who can help them with certain things. But if we are, for instance, I talk about our story ecosystem or your story ecosystem, and the first part of that ecosystem at the core is the brand story. And so, some people we work with, individuals or organizations, need to get clarity on the story they're telling and sharing with the world, and that's where we can help them. But if they do have clarity on that, the next step in that ecosystem is that message multiplier. Once you make your message, you got to multiply it, and that comes in the form of a book. And that tool, we can do everything from writing it for you in your voice, writing it with you, coaching you through that process, taking what you've already written, bringing it to life, and then bringing it out into the world, actually publishing. We have several different publishing imprints. We work with a lot of traditional publishers as well. Anything that's needed to bring a book to life, again, that's a brand defining storytelling. And then finally, that third part of that ecosystem is, how do you monetize your message? Because the book is not how you monetize your message. A lot of people think, I'll write a book, I'll be rich in a week. Like that's how it'll work. But the book is really a door opener. It's a business builder. It's an opportunity creator. I literally just got off a call a few minutes ago about my book, Your Story Advantage, and out of that came an opportunity to speak to a group of speakers, right? And so I'll go and I'll serve them, and if there's some people there that we can serve and help in some way, great. That builds our business, right? So, but that never would have happened without the book. The book creates that opportunity. But there's so many ways to monetize the message. I unpack a lot of them in Your Story Advantage, from courses to workshops to trainings to programs. There's just so many ways to do that. And we can help them with that too. But all of it begins with that first conversation of let's just hear your story and see if we can be of help.
I think story is so important, especially in today's culture where I think so many people feel as though you can't really trust relationships that we have. We can't trust our culture. We can't trust each other. You
Yeah.
emphasize high trust relationships in your work. How does story building help build trust in a world that's, let's be honest, is very skeptical?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially in not just skeptical, but with AI entering the
Oh,
picture as well.
definitely.
People are wondering, is what I'm even seeing real? All that. And I think here's the thing we have to realize is we are all always telling ourselves stories. When we get a piece of information or something, we immediately try to fit it into a larger story. How does that fit in with my story of how I perceive our nation or how my community or the situation or whatever the case may be? We're immediately plugging it into a story. And so when people are interacting with you or your brand or your business, they're already plugging you into a story and the truth is you are already putting a story out there. Whether you're intentional about it or not is the question. People are already perceiving you. You already have a story that's being shared. And so what we're telling people is, let's be intentional about your story. Let's be intentional about your message. Let's give some thought to elevating that would really cause you to stand out, to be different. And when you tell that story, especially consistently, when you tell it well and consistently, you build trust. People have a perception of you, Keith, of hey, we've listened to your podcast, we've heard you talk about this, we talk about that, we heard your brain. We have an assessment of that. Now, if you were to come out tomorrow and do something radically different and opposite of that, that would create this disconnect, and they would have trouble understanding. Well, what is Keith doing? I thought he was this, but now he's doing. But when you do that consistently over time, people begin to get a sense of I can trust Keith to always be this. Whether they agree with you or not, that's a whole nother matter. But it's really about trust. And as you said, trust is so hard to come by these days. It's so easily broken. And so to be intentional about that story is just what brings that to life and really creates a shared sense of trust as people grow about that, right? So as they get to know someone more and hear that story, it builds that trust, and then they start telling other people about the message that they heard because of that trust, and it begins to multiply.
I love it. So you've created resources that have impacted millions. I'm curious what's next for you and what's next for story builders.
What's next for me and what's next for story builders? Boy, if I knew that. Our passion, just being candid, Keith, our passion is to make an impact and make the world a better place. And so every day we wake up praying that God will bring us people who are out there making an impact, want to make the impact, want to multiply that message, because that's what drives us. That's what fuels us. And so, we're always excited to connect with people who are like, "Hey, I have a message," and because of that, we're not a fit for everybody. There are people with messages that we just say, "You know what? God bless you. We don't support that message. That's not a fit for us." You want to have alignment. You want to have alignment with the people you're working with. And the truth is, if you actually have a message, you're taking a position on something, it's not going to be a fit for everybody. So you want people who are picky about who they work with and their message. So I think that's the key for us. Is what we're trying to do is let's continue to reach people. Let's continue to speak to them. Let's continue to get in front of them and share this message that every story matters. Your story does give you a unique advantage if you have the courage to lean into it.
I love it. I love to ask my guests this question, Bill. What do you want your legacy to be?
I want people to look back at my time on the earth. Well, first of all, as a husband and a father, that's a given, right? And in terms of my faith, today that he was a man of great faith and lived consistently with that. But all of it really comes down to living a story worth telling. That's where it comes down to. And there's a prayer from the Book of Psalms. I think it's Psalm 90. Might have been a Psalm of Moses, actually. I don't remember the details, but it ends with this prayer of that God would establish the work of His hands. And I view that, if I were to put that in my vernacular, it's to make my story worth telling. That I could live a life that people would say, "Let me tell you about Bill. Let me tell you his story. Let me tell you what he did." And not just because I matter, but so then they will be inspired to live a story, right? So it has this multiplication effect. That to me is how it really matters to make the world a better place.
I love it. So on this season, we have a new thing now, a surprise question. Pick a number between 1 and 10 for your surprise question.
I will go with 7.
So I love this. What book belongs on everyone's bookshelf as what has produced so many books?
Oh, wow, that's cool. That's cool. Well, of course, I have to your story advantage. First of all, that means on everybody's bookshelf. Beyond that, beyond the Bible, right? Beyond those obvious types of recommendations, but um, on everyone's bookshelf, that's the challenge. I'm going to go with an interesting one here. One of my top 5 for sure, always has been, but it applies to everybody, and it's a book called "Up from Slavery." Booker T. Washington autobiography, and I read that as a young man, and it completely transformed how I was living as a young man. Like it really took me to another level. And he was such a great American, great man. And I would highly recommend. It's not a long read, but it is an inspiring read and stirring read. So I would recommend "Up from Slavery." It's I think it's in the public domain now as well, so it's readily available in so many different venues. But I would that's a book I would recommend everyone read.
Awesome. So, Bill, thank you for your sharing your wisdom and your incredible work that you're doing to help people live stories worth telling. For our listeners, if they want to learn more about Bill and your books, Story Advantage, or explore resources from story builders, where can they best find you and connect with you?
Well, easiest way to connect with us is at our website, mystorybuilders.com. They can get the book at yourstoryadvantage.com. I say yourstoryadvantage.com because there's a whole lot of bonuses there that they get for free. So I highly recommend that. Or they can get the book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books and wherever good books are sold. They can get it at any of those spots as well. And then if they just want to talk and chat, and let us hear their story, we'd love to do that. No obligation. they can just go to mystorybuilders.com/story, mystorybuilders.com/story, and just schedule time to chat with us and run ideas past us and their story. And if we can be of help, great. If not, we'll get out of their way and let them keep doing what they're doing.
Awesome. So to my listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Becoming Bridge Builders on your favorite podcast platform. Leave us a review and share this conversation with someone who needs to hear it, someone whose story needs to be told. Together, we can build bridges that can lead to understanding, influence, and lasting impact. I am your host, Keith Haney. Bill, thanks so much for being an awesome guest on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. From one builder to another, Keith. It's been great to be here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. But act fast. With only 40 spots remaining this month, claim your free revenue ceiling audit now at the link included in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at @bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin. Thanks again, and tune in next time.